When we think of nuclear powers, we often imagine the United States, Russia, China, or even North Korea, nations that have built, tested, and maintained nuclear arsenals for decades. But there's one country that did the unthinkable: South Africa. We developed nuclear weapons and, when the world least expected it, voluntarily gave them up. Today we're going to explore the fascinating story behind South Africa's nuclear weapons program. The rise, the secrecy, the moral choice to dismantle, and the international intrigue surrounding it. The story begins in the 1950s, at the height of the Cold War, in an isolated South Africa. The apartheid government under Prime Minister Hendrik Verwoerd had a vision of regional dominance. With the rise of communist influence in Africa, particularly in neighboring countries like Angola and Mozambique, the South African government was deeply concerned about our security. The Cold War had divided the world into two opposing camps, and South Africa, despite its strategic position, was feeling increasingly vulnerable. By the mid-1950s, South Africa had significant natural resources, including vast reserves of uranium. This was crucial. With a strong scientific community already in place, we looked at nuclear technology not just for energy, but for security. We joined the U.S. Atoms for Peace program in 1957, a global initiative that allowed countries to develop nuclear technology for peaceful purposes. In this period, the US and the UK provided technical help, building South Africa's first research reactor at Pelindaba in 1965. But as the 1960s progressed, we were not just interested in peaceful nuclear energy. We began to see nuclear weapons as a way to guarantee our sovereignty and deter any external threats. By the 1970s, under Prime Minister B.J. Vorster, the idea of nuclear weapons was no longer just a theoretical pursuit. As the Cold War intensifies, South Africa feared that Soviet-aligned forces could make a push in southern Africa. These fears grew as communist insurgencies took root in the region. In response, the South African government made a bold decision. It would begin building nuclear weapons. Using its enriched uranium and the expertise of its Atomic Energy Board, the AEB, South Africa launched a covert nuclear weapons program. By the early 1980s, South Africa had successfully built its first nuclear bomb. By 1987, there were 6 fully operational nuclear weapons in the country. These were gun-type fission devices very similar to the ones used in the Hiroshima bombing. They were designed to be delivered by aircraft, and though there was no public test, the country had completed the final pieces of a secret and powerful deterrent. However, by the time the bombs were actually ready, the world had begun to change. The Cold War was starting to thaw, and in South Africa, the apartheid system was under increasing international pressure. Prime Minister P.W. Botha, who had overseen the development of the nuclear arsenal, found himself facing new challenges. International sanctions were tightening, and the growing isolation of South Africa was becoming unbearable. Botha knew that maintaining nuclear weapons would only further alienate us from the global community. And then, in 1989, F.W. de Klerk became president. De Klerk recognized that the world was changing. The Soviet Union was losing its grip on Africa, and the global community was moving towards peace and disarmament. The time for nuclear weapons in South Africa, a country already under heavy scrutiny for our apartheid policies, seemed to be coming to an end. De Klerk's government made the controversial decision to dismantle the country's nuclear arsenal. It wasn't just about international pressure as well. It was about survival. South Africa was on the brink of political transformation, with the ANC gaining strength. De Klerk feared that if the ANC came into power, they might inherit the nuclear arsenal, a situation that the then government felt South Africa could not afford. In 1989, under de Klerk's leadership, the country secretly began dismantling its nuclear weapons. By 1991, South Africa signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT, pledging to never develop nuclear weapons again. This was a monumental decision. We were the first and only country to voluntarily give up nuclear weapons. In 1993, de Klerk made the startling announcement to the world. South Africa had developed nuclear weapons, but had chosen to dismantle them as a part of our commitment to international peace. the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, verified that we had no longer had any nuclear weapons. And by 1994, when Nelson Mandela became president, South Africa was officially a non-nuclear state. By dismantling our nuclear weapons, we not only changed our global standing but also laid the foundation for a new era. Mandela's rise to power marked the end of apartheid, and the world began to see us as not some rogue state with hidden nukes, but as a champion of peace and disarmament. South Africa's decision to give up its nukes remains one of the most remarkable and unique actions in nuclear history. South Africa's journey from building nuclear weapons to dismantling them voluntarily is a testament to the power of diplomacy, leadership, and the changing tides of global politics.